bleed anymore. And again, just coming in here, softening it up and pulling it a little bit more into my background. And I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to bring a little bit here, just on one side of my vein, just pull some of that color. Just keep picking up extra water, and again, I'm coming in next to the stem, getting that shadow area on my leaf, soften it up, and I'm going to blot it with my tissue again, just to soften. Add a little bit in here next to my center vein, and again come in here in my negative space. When you're working on the tulip, let's finish up this area in here, since I have a nice wide area here with all of these squiggles. I'm going to just softly pull this up into my background, and as you pull it, you can see it's starting to soften on the edges, again just for a little extra interest. When I'm working on my tulip petals, I do each one individually. Again, I have some lines here on either side of the center vein, so I want it to be a little darker there, so I'm laying my brush next to that center vein, pulling up into those lines. And I'm really going to blot. The more you blot, the pinker it turns. And I have pink tulips, so that's just going to add a little extra effect to it. Same thing on this side, coming up next to that side edge, next to my vein, onto those shadow lines, blotting with my tissue. You can see what a pretty pink that is. When I'm working on the back petals, I'm basically going right next to the petal in front, letting that water fill in, and again blot with my paper towel. Once again, that's what gives you a little more pink hue, is when you do the blotting. Down in here, I want to shade next to all of those petals, right here where I added my lines. I'm going to bring a little more color up into that petal. And these are all going to turn out differently. Even though you have a basic pattern and some basic pictures, it's all going to depend on where the water pulls the ink, how much you blot or not. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow in here, because this is where the petals overlap the petal underneath. Once again, blotting with my tissue. Add a little bit of shadow down in here and right along this edge. And let's blot that one. Actually, I'm going to pull some of this down a little more, and let's pull this up. Let's see how that's going to work. Always fun to experiment, and now's the time to do it. It's just watercolor paper if you don't like the way it turns out, and I really like that. Look at how pretty that is with the pinks and the blues in there. It's just a piece of watercolor paper. If you don't like the way it turns out, you can always cut another. Well, let's just quickly get this one finished up. Again, I'm going to work in my negative area here. When I'm in the negative area, that's where I want most of my color. So I'm keeping my brush pretty wet. Again, I'm going to use the edge of this petal to kind of pull that out, and the edge of my leaf to pull that area out too. And then just let it softly fade out. And again, if you want, blot it with your tissue and soften that color up. On the stem, you want to get a little bit of a shadow right here under the flower. So I'm going to work that color in there, And also down here at the base, you want to get a little bit of a shadow. And back to a leaf. Let's work that color up. Maybe add a little more color to this one because it's a little bit more underneath. So I'm going to have a little bit more shadow in here. Blot that up a little bit. Even though it's pink, it's still going to be pretty once we add our paint colors. And one last time, again, over into my squiggles, I'm going to pull this color down from the lower edge of my leaf. I'm not going to pick up any more water. I'm just going to use what I have in my brush and what I have on my paper and let that soften out into my background. If you don't want that much